Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And the invasion part 3 has started. It's been pretty interesting already. We now know that the Triglavians basically winning a fight in a system they don't like just means that they retreat, and they are apparently still looking for the right systems, which are the ones with blue stars, as was projected by the players actually in that amazing full report that they made on Triglavians and their behavior. So that is very cool. I think the first system has been changed from a 0.6 to a 0.3, so from high sec to low sec. That's very interesting, of course, but it also looks like you don't have like full low sec rules, so you can't open up a sino and get like lots of carriers in and things like that. That doesn't work yet. I'm gonna say who knows how things will evolve, of course, and that's what's really cool. We're just constantly finding out new stuff about these invasions and how they are changing the game in a very cool way. For instance, it looks like Edencom, when they take over low-sec systems, they can also put up a sino jammer there. So also changing those rules a little bit, edging them closer to a high-sec situation rather than a full low-sec situation. So this is still fully evolving. My brother has sort of expressed that he would prefer to side with Edencom if we can't stay neutral. So that's probably the direction that Go Incorporated will be heading if we're forced into fights. We'll see how I handle that, because part of me does really want to take part in that content. But on the other hand, maybe staying neutral can also provide you with some potential opportunities. If eventually the Triglavians don't mind a neutral player, right now they're still very aggressive to us, we could also go mine in their systems. And of course in low sec, staying neutral means that you have, I think, the best chance at just sniping people down, if that's what you want to do. I think for PvP in low sec this can be a very interesting content. So of course this is the big news. We'll keep you guys up to date. And if I'm not mistaken, in the Pulse they also mentioned that some graphical updates, including the new warp tunnel through gates, should be coming in the next release in June. So let's hope that all of that works out, and I definitely look forward to it. Let's take a quick look at the new Eden store as well. At the moment there's 10% off of Plex as well, which should have a little bit of an impact on the Plex prices. And over here we've got the Eden's Hunter's skin. Okay, definitely looks pretty unique. Look at that Noctis. That's very cool, with lights up here. Is that Eden? Yeah, that's obviously Edencom inspired. That actually looks pretty cool. I really like it on the Basilisk as well. So if you want to go and rep Edencom forces, you can do so in style. You can basically show your allegiance to them as well. And oh, that's actually, I think, nice. I was expecting, why don't you put up some skins for more popular ships, but no, what they're actually doing here is also providing you with the option of an Eden's Hunter skin for Drekavac and Kikimora, so that you can actually fly a Triglavian ship, but show that you have the colors to be on the side of Edencom. And then the Kybernaut Clade skins are here as well if you want to side with the Triglavians. Oh man, that does look cool. Does that also change, considering the screenshot here looks like there might be some effects on these as well? I have to say, these look very cool. So Drekavac is also a ship that I still have to like test myself. I'm not even sure if I have all the skills for that just yet, but oh man, shiny red with black, that of course looks amazingly good as well. So very nice to see these new skins. And you also have one for the Nestor here, for the Lashak, of course. That makes a lot of sense. And then the Vindicator, if you want to blap the Edencom forces in style in a Vindicator, you can do so as well. In my opinion, these look pretty damn nice. So as I've said, we're not seeing sales or anything like that here, but we are seeing a 10% Plex sale, which I received a mail to from EVE itself. So let's move on to the market, which is of course why most of you guys are here, and we'll be starting with Plex and stuff at 450. There we go, Plex and stuff, so not minerals. Let's click on this and let's start here with Plex. You can see that there's a bit more pressure. This is normal, of course, if CCP comes out with another sale. We are down to 2.6 million for the sellers in Jita, less than 2.5 million for the buyers. And on the price history, well, we did a little bit of a jump up from 2.5 million, and that is going to be snuffed out pretty quickly, I think, by the sale that's happening at the moment. On the other hand, it's very noticeable that sellers are hesitating to go below 2.6 million. Even in the Tranquility Trade Tower, they only go 5,000 disc below that to 2.6 million. Yep, that's right. And then the buyers go up to, well, not that much. They're still well below the 2.5 million mark. So at the moment, I would still say that there is a very good opportunity to grab some cheap Plex, especially on this sale right now. And I am seeing this resistance in the seller side of things to go much below 2.6 million. So I personally do believe that we're forming a bottom. Now, I've said that before, but here at this point, we really have this 1 year turnaround. At some point, it is going to change again, I think, and we'll start to go back up. Except, of course, if I'm mistaken and CCP wants to continue to basically increase the value of ISK by making it harder to get lots of ISK flowing into the game, then of course that could keep those prices in check. But as I've also said quite often before, in a virtual game like this, a virtual currency knows inflation. It's practically inevitable. Outside of the most extreme situations, players will always earn more ISK than they tend to spend, and as a result, we should see inflation in the price of Plex take over again at some point. For the multiple pilot train certificate, we have that same jump up, and then a little bit of pressure on the daily averages back on the downside, probably due to that Plex sale, of course. Less than 1.5 billion for the sellers and 1.2 billion for one buyer. More buyers here. Yeah, 1.24 billion basically for the buyers as well. And actually quite a few of them in the Tranquility Trading Tower. That's where the action is for these goods, of course. On the skill extractor front, we have that same bump as well. We went below 300 million on the average prices. That is actually pretty impressive. 280, I think, is what we managed to reach. And now you get this hesitation phase again. 305 million already for the sellers. 283 for the buyers. They are being forced up. And really, I think we are going to hesitate on the seller side to go below 300, and then for the buyers it's going to be difficult to try and drag the price down to less than 280 as well. So here again I'm seeing some resistance to really go even lower, and I do think that bottoms are starting to be formed. Another thing that could throw a wrench in that prediction is of course that CCP comes out with even more sales. But who knows, we'll keep an eye on it, of course. On the injector front, let's see what all of that bottom forming that I'm seeing here means for these goods. Yeah, they're starting to flatten out finally as well. Very pronounced 1 year low point though. Look at that, we come from 1 billion ISK and we are now down to 745 million for the first seller, 763 for most to be fair, and 700 million ISK for the buyers. That's actually still a wide margin, showing that in my opinion, interest in the skill points is a little bit down, which is normal. We still have more login events going. CCP is still giving us a lot of free SP just for logging in daily and for taking part in activities. So we'll I think continue to see quite a bit of pressure on the SP front of the large scale injectors, which is a pretty major part of its makeup, of course. And then the rest is Plex, which is also only stalling, so we shouldn't see like a big resurgence or anything like that right now. But of course, the closer to 700 million that you can grab a large scale injector at the moment, I think the better your investment, and it's probably worth it in the longer term if you're looking for something that has a little bit more than just the edge against inflation that Plex has. A large scale injector is perfect. Basically what we're hoping for is that CCP eventually tries other things and finds different rewards than just SP. activity and that interest in that researchers, that should really be very nice combined with inflation for large-scale injectors on the medium to long term. For these small-scale injectors, we've got that same thing. In fact, it's already pulling back up towards 150 million on the 5-day moving average, 157 million, a little bit above that for the sellers, and 137 million almost for the buyers. So that's a 20 million margin on something that's about 150. That's still a pretty reasonable margin as well between these two. So again, if you can buy one below 140 million, which you can try at the moment, I think 139 is definitely going to be something that some people will consider, and that is well below the entire chart, very pronounced 1 year low point again. I think it's a great time to at least consider that investment if you want to make it. Not necessarily buying all of them that you can, but at least a couple so that you're ready. It's like buying a couple of gold bars, in my opinion, with an edge, with a little bit of potential extra as well on top of that. And then we've got our daily alpha injectors that are also, getting back up a little bit after playing with that 30 million low point again. We didn't quite reach it, but we are at 34 million for the sellers, 31.5 million for the buyers. So you can see we don't have to go down that much to get those buyers to 30 million and below that. So here again, a bit of bottom forming that I am seeing happen with buyers not really willing to or not able to drive the price down to less than 30 million in a more substantial way. And then we've got the hypercores. These bounced back a little bit. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I saw something in a tweet, if I'm not mistaken, that CCP did away for a limited period of time with one of the fees on the hypernet, so that should see a little bit more activity, and I think that's reflected right here in the jump from 280 to 300,000 ISK on average for the hypercores. A bit of aggressive selling happening, going back down to 280 and below, 262,000 for the buyers. Maybe also a little bit of dumping happening here for people that were holding on to hypercores and are saying, you know what, I'm just gonna sell them right now because the downward trend is definitely something that's starting to be pretty noticeable in the hypercores. Hypernet relay, it probably has its niche in EVE Online, but the cataclysmic worry that some people had that this is going to become a ubiquitous gambling mechanic that basically takes over from contracts, markets, and all of that thing, I think has not really materialized. I just hope that there are no excesses here, that nobody spends too much real life money on Plex to turn to ISK and then to just buy tickets and hope to get lucky. At least the odds are still like fair, right? The number of tickets, the divisions, and all of that, it's just straight math, nothing shady going on there. But it's not something that I follow at all personally. I'm not a gambler, so yeah, the hypernet relay not really too interesting for me personally. Next up, let's move on to the minerals, coming in at, well, let's say 13 minutes. Like that, and as always we'll start with titanium that bounces back from that 8 ISK. So here again also a bit of bottom forming. The market is starting to find its price ranges, I think, and is not really willing to go too much lower or higher from these points right now. 820 for the sellers, although it's just two of them, and then we go up to 8.5 ISK for the buyers. So two recent sell orders, one that includes 246 million units, so that is going to take a little bit of time, but then 8.09 for the buyers, almost 8.1 ISK. There's definitely a thinning of the margin, so between sellers and buyers they're coming together, and the buyers are really not able that well to try and lower the price to less than 8 ISK. So we're still in a great territory, in my opinion, for titanium, increasing or having a very nice return on your efforts spent there, even in HiSec. And of course, you may have noticed from my video, when Eden come, or I'm gonna presume here the Triglavians take over and you're in the right standings, it may become very lucrative to try to do mining in those systems as well. Let's take a look at pyrite. Despite that, we're seeing a pretty stable pyrite just below 8 ISK. Not that bad in my opinion. Almost 8 for the sellers, except for one of them again that's coming in with a very recent sell order at 774. 757 for the buyers. Well, considering this 1 year chart, it's not bad. Considering the fact that you're getting a lot more titanium per cubic meter than pyrite, it's still in a weird spot. But overall, I'd say let's be happy that these prices seem to be defendable for pyrite as well. Mexilon went up to 1 year high point last week, gives back a little bit of ground, but is definitely staying clear from its averages for the year. On the high side, almost 90 ISK for the sellers. Some people coming in with volumes as well, probably trying to take advantage of these higher prices, selling some stocks. 84 ISK for the buyers. Yeah, they've been forced up quite a lot. This is very expensive Mexilon. Very good news again for miners, even in high sec, because this is doable there as well. The Isogen front, all right, even more good news in my opinion. I mean, that is if you think that higher mineral prices are good news. I personally like them. We were edging towards things becoming just too worthless, so seeing that value come back, and I think is actually a good thing. It makes losses more meaningful in the game. You don't have to overdo it, of course, but we're already seeing the first new faucets coming in, of course, with those sites in the invasions potentially. So I think it's a positive, and also it's in my opinion a great positive for people that enjoy the mining playstyle. It does show that what they do in the game in a sandbox, I think that's very important, has an impact, has value, whereas you're not being drowned now by, well, the Rorcal wave that could really flood everything, and bots, of course. I think this is also a sign that the fight against botting is still ongoing, and that they're not having a very good time. I can imagine if you've got bots going in a system that all of a sudden becomes low sec, that you know, it's not going to be very pleasant to try to keep that up and running. So Isogen actually going back up a little bit and getting very close to a 1 year high point. 2160 for the sellers and 21 ISK almost for the buyers. Yeah, decent prices. Again, that's relative, of course. You're getting less Isogen per cubic meter normally than you're getting Mexilon, and yet that price is so much lower. If there's two minerals with a lot of potential to still make a big resurgence, it would be Isogen and pyrite. And of course, we also have that Isogen potential speculation happening with the Triglavians as a form of Isogen, which someone pointed it out though, you can already find in the loot tables for Triglavian and Abyssal content, but you know, Isogen also very much at the center of their power generation. So who knows, if CCP wants to increase the value of Isogen, they could just add a sort of a use for it, for maybe exotic weapons and things like that, that could be used both by Edencom and the Triglavians. Who knows what's going to happen there? That is pure speculation, of course. Our Noxium market is actually showing signs of a little bit of weakness, going back down, but staying between the 300 and 350 mark. That's still pretty good, I think. 340 for the sellers, 281 for the buyers. A bit of a margin opening up here, so we gotta be a little bit careful on oversupply, but we're still above the average for the year, so I would say that that's okay. And then we have our former, well, back to Nosec minerals with Zydrine above 1,000. In the last week, has to give back a little bit of ground there. Of course, the doubling in the price in a matter of 4 months is a little bit too much for the market to just keep going. And yet, look at that, 1,031 ISK for the sellers, and then the buyers, if we go into system, are down to 820. Here we definitely have a little bit of a margin opening up, and this is going to become an interesting battle, I think, on this market, because the sellers in this new situation, or that resembles a lot more the situation before Moon Mining, where you had very stable sources of Zydrine and Megasite in HiSec, they were able to truly dictate the price of Zydrine, for instance. The average prices on the chart would also always be very close to the sellers. Now here you can see a little bit of pressure, and today's daily average is already quite a bit lower than that. And what you also notice is that we've got 1 million here, 3 million here, 100,000 here. You have some of these smaller sellers that are definitely still providing Zydrine to the market as well. So it may need a little bit more time, or it's possible that there's still sources available like those invasion sites right now, where you know, there are resources available that provide all these minerals, if I'm not mistaken. including Morphite, that can then be mined in relative safety, high-sec safety, and on top of that, within the faction that you're supporting as well. So there are still sources for Zydrine and Megasite available in high-sec, especially at the moment. So as a result, we've got this little bit of pressure, and it is going to be very difficult for like big null-sec groups and things like that to try to dominate this market and dictate those sell prices like they used to. For Megasite, we have that same hesitation going back down from above 600 down to 591 for the 592, excuse me, for the sellers, 550 for the buyers. Again, decent margin actually between sellers and buyers. And here 2,650,000, 600,000, quite a few recent ones. I'm actually going to say that this potentially is already the impact of the mining that can happen, for instance, in a Edencom Fortress site or system. It's decently available and it had almost everything. If I'm right on that, we should also see a little bit of a drop in Morphite. And look at that, yeah, 5-day moving average definitely being pushed back down below 17.5k. We're talking still 17.9k for the sellers, but buyers already quite wary, I'm gonna say, at 16,000 discs, starting to open up a margin here as well. So a little bit of maybe a pause or maybe a first bottom formation in the mineral squeeze that we've been experiencing in the last couple of months in EVE Online. It's starting to show here. Morphite, Zydrine and Megasite definitely seem to be peaking. I think it's because of the invasion and the resources that are available there. Next up, the PI front 2110. Let's take a look at these and see if there's any changes. Honestly, with focus on the invasions, minerals still being very expensive, Plex stuff only starting to bottom out. I'm not seeing too much ISK flowing into these things. At this point, we also don't really have any information on like new structures or that we have to provide resources for Edencom or the Triglavians. So I was hoping that would come, but so far that's not been the case. It may still develop that way, but that should, in my opinion, mean not really a change in PI. I'm fully expecting a lack of demand still showing up. We can see the broadcast nodes, for instance, definitely going back below 1.9 million on average and being under pressure below average. 1.93 million for the sellers, and look at the lack of buyers here. 1.83 million for the buyers, going up to 1.84. A little bit of activity in the Tranquility Trading Tower, but that's again pretty relative. 42 units, 727 units, you know, those aren't really the major big investments. And even in Jita itself, it's not that big in volumes. 1500, 2000 here in perimeter. So there are some orders, but the lack of demand is still pretty obvious. Construction blocks, let's start with the chart here. Going back down, we try to get back above 10k. It is just not sustainable in the current PI market. 9,000 discs for the sellers, 8,500 discs for the buyers. And again, that lack of demand is clearly showing a bit of activity. Nope, not even that much activity in the Tranquility Trade Tower. Most competitive buy order is in Jita 4.4. So consumer electronics, the chart actually going back up. All right, there are always exceptions to the rules, of course, and this is decently impressive, getting back well above 11,000 disc on the chart for consumer electronics. Volumes are up a little bit as well. 11,680 for the sellers, 10,860 for the buyers. I'm still not seeing that much support on the buy side of things, but we've got a little bit of a resurgence in consumer electronics. I would say if you've been holding on to that, I would not blame you for trying to sell at least part of your stocks, because we haven't seen 11,500 in quite a while for consumer electronics, and it should be doable at this point. Coolants next, definitely still struggling and staying well below average. 10,500 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers. Again, showing the lack of buy orders right here. Cryoprotectant Solutions continuing its normalization trend, and in fact speeding that up at the tail end here. If we look at what's happening down towards 100,000 disc, which is a normal range. 126,000 for the sellers, 106,000 for the buyers. And it's really again that lack of demand that is clearly driving this price back down very very quickly. I would not be surprised if we actually have enough momentum to go below 100,000 disc all of a sudden for cryoprotectant solution. The focus is really not on the PI market. Enriched uranium, 1 year low point, getting to below 11,000 disc, I think 11,350 for the sellers, 9,073 ISK for the buyers. That is very, very low. You can already see from the ticker as well, fuel prices are struggling because of all of this as well, but it also means that potentially you have opportunities. I'm hoarding most of the stuff as long as we're not selling close to average. And enriched uranium, for instance, I mean, you can buy this well below 10,000 disc. Look at this full 1 year chart. That is so much below the market average for the year that it really makes sense, in my opinion, to try and be ready for the comeback, which inevitably at some point will happen. Integrity response drones, again a chart that clearly shows that downwards trend and that we're still struggling with a lack of demand. 2.1 million almost for the sellers, 2 million for the first buyer, down to 1.95 million after that. And look at that difference here again, quite a bit of sellers. Buyers in JITA, 5 of them, and just a few of them are what I would call competitive. Mechanical parts next, staying below 10,000 disc on average, 10,400 for the first seller, 10,900 for most, but again 9,600 for the first buyer, and there's not that many super serious buyers in mechanical parts either, so it is showing that same trend across the board almost. Organic motor applicators staying well below a million, yep, 980,000 for the sellers, 915 for the buyers. Robotics right here staying also well below 90,000 disc, 89 for the sellers, 83. Self-harmonizing power cores, 1 year low points, quite a big dive. So this and enriched uranium, these charts do look very interesting to put up a buyer at this point. Look at the lack of buyers, that's crazy. 1.7 million for the sellers, there's one buyer at 1.5 million. And in the Tranquility Trade Tower, that's the price that they are competing with at the moment. But 1.5 million for self-harmonizing power cores, that has an average price of 2 million ISK across the year, most of the year. That is actually really nice in my opinion. 25% potential, easy. Superconductors try to get back as well, but to no avail. It is not lasting, down to 11,900 for the sellers, 9,500 for the buyers. Again, that wide margin between sellers and buyers. And then if we look at how much we can browse on the sellers, and then this is it for the buyers, showing that same trend. 11,900. I mean, I wouldn't blame you to at least try to sell if you need the ISK for it, but I'm already in hoarding mode for these as well. Test cultures holding on to a price range, 9,300 for the sellers, 800 for the first buyer. But again, look at how quickly those buyers go down to 7,750 and below that. So a bit of patience. If this drops off, then it's pretty obvious that these orders will have been filled, and get another opportunity to grab some really cheap test cultures. And finally, with where mainframes, again getting very close to 1 year low points here, 1.995 million, so just below 2 million for the sellers and below 1.9 million for the buyers. And there's 4 of them in JITA. And then do we go up substantially in price into Tranquility Trade Tower? Nope, very close to that price. We get a few people trying to grab a couple hundred with where mainframes, which is, I think, is the right move longer term. If we look at these charts, these are potentially very good investments. All right, let's move on to the advanced moon materials, coming in at 2810. I'm not sure if there's anything to expect here. We are heading low sec a little bit with these invasions, but at the moment I think we were on a slight downtrend after a bit of volatility, and I don't see any real signs that that's going to change. The Imperium is deploying, if I'm not mistaken as well. I read that on the subreddit, but will that have an impact? Potentially on like a few goods, depending on where they're going. But for now, crystalline carbonite going back down below 150. 150 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. That's slightly below average, but definitely pretty close to the average. So I would say that that's not dramatic yet. Ferrite carbide landing on 137 on the chart, 141 for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. a little bit of a lack of buyers, yes, but not that many sellers either. So this is slightly below average, but again, not dramatic in my book. Titanium carbide is definitely at the low end, but considering it's still above 150, relatively speaking, this is not that bad. 159 for the sellers, 144 for the buyers. And then tungsten carbide is stabilizing above 200 disc. That's not bad. 204 for the sellers, 191 for the buyers. So we're seeing a bit of pressure, maybe a little bit of a lack of demand, but supplies are not so overwhelming that we are crashing the prices either. Metamaterials, here are the photonic metamaterials that went down to 15k, but actually again going back up a little bit, almost 17,000 for the sellers, 15,270 for the buyers. That's slightly below average, but again not that bad. Plasmonic metamaterials has to give back grounds, but again, it's relative, staying above 20k, 20,500 for the sellers, 19,800 for the buyers, showing that there is a bit of a lack of demand, but there's just not that many sellers at this point anymore, I don't think, so we should keep this all right. Nonlinear metamaterials struggling a little bit as well here at the tail end, but staying above 20,000 by quite a bit. 21,250 for the sellers, 20,000 for the first buyer, so that's all right in my book. And terahertz metamaterials also coming back just a little bit, staying at 22,000 for the sellers, and a bit of a margin. So yeah, it's almost the same story as in PI. We don't have enough demand for everything, but supplies are quite a bit lower as well, meaning that we're slightly below average. I don't see this crashing down unless those come online for some reason. Fermionic condensates continuing to struggle as well, low landing at 80,000 disc, which is definitely pretty low. 80,000 for the seller, 78,000 for the first buyer, and then down pretty quickly. So again, bit of a lack of demand, but nothing too bad. Ferrogel holding on that 40,000 disc, same story I think. Fullerite had a bit of a jump up here to almost 2,000 disc. That was pretty impressive, and actually that 5-day moving average continuing to go up to 1250. That's pretty impressive. 1,250 for the sellers, almost 1,200 for the buyers. Definitely the winner right now. If like half a year ago you bought these on some bottom prices close to maybe 900 disc or something like that, you could consider a sell at still 30% profit at this point. Quite a strong performance counter to most other advanced materials here for Fullerites. Hypersynaptic fibers diving back down 10,000 disc. Are we able to defend that? Yeah, but it's a very tough battle. 10,240 for the sellers, 8,840 for the buyers, and again showing that those buyers are not showing up here. Nano transistors, same slow edge back down to less than 6,000 discs, 6,120 for the sellers, 5,800 for the buyers. The fact that this is the average price on the 5-day moving average clearly indicates that there's quite a few sellers going straight to these buyers. Then we've got phenolic composites that's holding on decently well, just below 2,000 disc, just above that for the sellers and just below that for the buyers. Again, showing that there's quite a few impatient people selling to those buyers at the moment. And then ceramic fibers also 350, trying to defend that here, 353, but here we don't have that many buyers, and so that could be in danger. But overall, advanced PI material a little bit too low in demand, but nothing as bad as some of the PI materials that are clearly making 1-year lows, and with even more massive margins between sellers and buyers. What's the impact on the Tech 2 ships? Let's take a look at that at 33 minutes. Like that, are there opportunity? I think it should start to form at this point, right? Advanced Moon Materials, nothing too crazy, but clearly below average. And I'm not sure what's happening that much in Gnostic, but I'm not seeing that much destruction. And the Aries here going substantially below 25 million on the chart, getting very close to a 1-year low point. 24.5 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. Maybe we should try to open that up here. Take a look at that. Yeah, this is actually the most competitive buy order as well. You're easily able to buy an Aries for 22 million, which is still below the entire chart in my opinion. Not bad. could be worth it, a small investment right here. The chart does look very good. Basilisk is staying pretty strong at 230 million here, 230 for the sellers, 200 million for the buyers, and this makes a lot of sense if you have been keeping an eye on the invasion stuff. You can actually rep the faction that you want to help, and as a result logistics are pretty important in what's happening at the moment. So I'm fully expecting these to be the exception to what may be a trend with the Ares. There may be some other ships that are very popular at the moment in these activities, so we'll see if we can spot them. Cerberus does not seem to be one of them, just crashed from 280 down to 230 million ISK. Not yet at a 1-year low point, but 225 now for the sellers, 204 for the buyers. That could almost be worth it to try and grab one. Oh, and I haven't... Yeah, the order history is here. Okay, I completely forgot about that. I was fully invested in the invasions, but that's something that I should definitely keep in mind as well. So the Cerberus is starting to crash. You're buying very close to 200 million. You could try it. This is pretty sharp move down and seems to be stalling already at this price range, but trades made. Let's see if I can find a Cerberus. I managed to buy one for 195 at some point, and I think below that as well. So it may still be a little bit too early right now, but if you want to move in, this does make a decent amount of sense. The Crow, terrible charts on the scaling, but we are definitely going down here as well towards the low point. 26.5 million for the sellers, less than 25 million for the buyers. Couple of competitive orders, a bit of and these are actually not that new, so a bit of patience may lead to an even better buy opportunity. That's considering the Ares is great right now. That's what I would personally do. And then the Guardian going up to 300 million ISK. Armor rep, of course, very good for the Triglavians. 285 million for the sellers, 264 million for the buyers. Very expensive. If only I had bought that Guardian for 184, I would be sitting golden at 100 million profit on that trade. It was the best buy order when I made it, but the competition was a little bit too hard, so there's no way that I'm gonna grab that one at this point. But showing that potential in the Tech 2 ships here, the Guardian, not even on crazy volumes, but because they do make a lot of sense in the current content, you get this incredible opportunity at profits. The Hawk is going back down to less than 35 million on the chart, 28.5 million for the buyers here. 28.5 is already, yeah, definitely below the 30 million mark. You could consider that as well, just to be ready on a potential frigate event. Heretic, flat, but around 60 million. I've got one for 52. I'm pretty happy with that, unless buyers are below that. They're not at 53.6. I'd say it's still too early. Then the Hound, here is where it could definitely start to be interesting. We had already seen last week that the stealth bombers were struggling, at least some of them were oversupplied, and look at this confirmation here together with the Ares. The Hound is playing with a 1-year low point at 22.5 million for today's average, 24.8 million for the sellers, 20.4 million for the buyers. This does look like a great time to try to grab a Hound as close as possible to 20 million ISK, which, look at this chart, is a great opportunity. And this is a bit of surprise to me, because if you want to disrupt things in low sec, I do think stealth bombers can make a lot of sense. So I'm a little bit surprised that there are no stealth bomber fleets out there trying to grab those battleships that do tend to be used quite often in big fleets in these invasion sites. The Ishtar holding at 230 million. That's exactly what you would expect in a PvE platform, but that's probably not perfect for this content either. You know, you want a bit more tank, I think, for what the Triglavians and Edencom tends to throw at you. 241, 242 almost for the sellers, 211 for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up here though. On the buy side, so you can definitely grab a decently cheap one. And then the Manticore. I should quickly look at the volumes on the Hound. The Hound was oversupplied with this 243, and that is what's creating this buy opportunity. The Manticore was not massively oversupplied, and so here we see a bit more hesitation, but we are still below 30 million ISK, less than that for the sellers, and 27 million for the buyers. This is a tougher buy opportunity to call. I'd prefer to see 25 and below for the Manticore. So yeah, definitely look at the Hound rather than the Manticore, and that's because these volumes just haven't been there just yet. The Munin surges back up to 250. I would not be surprised if some Munin fleets find their way to the invasion content. So 250 for the sellers, 225 for the buyers. Slight sell opportunity, you could say, although not the gamble I would have taken. And then the Nemesis is going down to well below 25 million on the downside here as well. Not on too much supply, so 24.7 million with 48 as the latest sell order. It's going to be tricky to try and take advantage of that. Just above 21 million for the buyers. If we try and look at that on the chart, very close to a 1-year low point. So you could try the Nemesis. It's going to be a lot more competitive than the Hound, which also means that potentially you have a much faster return on that Nemesis as well, of course. But if you want to be basically sure of a good buy, yeah, the Hound still has way too much supply. You're bound to be able to grab a cheap one here. Then we've got the Oneros, goes back down to less than 200 million ISK, but you know, tends to hover around that 205 for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. Bit of a lack of demand on the Oneros front, not surprising considering its low volumes. Then we get the Purifier, that's going down to less than 25 million ISK. Let's take a quick look at the volumes here. That 151 is going to keep things pretty stable normally. So those buyers are down to 22.2 million, sellers at 24.5 million. Let's look at this full chart, 22.2, very close to 1-year low point again. Purifier, Hound do seem to be in great places. Nemesis, yeah, but it's gonna be a little bit harder. And then the Saber, that's unexpected, crashing to a 1-year low point on one of the interdictors here. 59.9 million for the sellers, 56.7 million for the buyers. That seems to be an opportunity. Yeah, I'd love to see this crash down a little bit more, but it does look like there are some people keeping a very close eye on the Saber market. It's just a margin that went down because of quite a bit of supply right now. You could try it though. It's very clearly trading at a 1-year low point right now. Then we get the Scimitar up to 250 million ISK, 244 right now for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. Again, logistics cruiser, very popular in the current events. And so the Zarmast, is trading a little bit above what it's been doing for the last 4 months. So let's attribute that to profitability or to popularity. But it's 364 million for the sellers, 324 for the buyers. Quite a bit more expensive than even the Guardian at this point. So that's probably why the Zarmast is not shooting up like what the Guardian has done. Very impressive, that one. Alright, so take 2 ships. Yep, small ships, I'd say you can definitely try to buy. And if you happen to have some logistics cruisers that you bought at the right time, it's definitely a good time, I think, to take some profits. Let's move on to the Tech 3 ship market, 4150. But first, I am going to grab a bit of water because we've been going for 40 minutes. There we go, refreshed and ready for the Tech 3 ship market. Let's see if the waves are finally dying down here. Basically, quite a bit of volatility. Confessor, Heki, Jackdaw had massive spikes in different time frames, and all of that has really thrown the market out of whack. So the Confessor is going back down, trying to get back to that 40 million average. 44 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers on a decent amount of supply. This could actually still be a little bit too much for it as well. But if you follow Eve Talk for quite a while, you also know that 40 million tends to, in my opinion, be the normal price for a tactical destroyer. So a bit more supply on also a slightly higher price. Headgate is trying to do the same thing. It is looking like finally we are reaching that stage. 44.6 million for the sellers, 37.7 million for the buyers, which should explain a little bit less supply, but also a bit more competitiveness. And you can see here, we don't see as many in a single sell order, but you do see quite a few sell orders in the last 24 hours because they want that best price possible for that Headgate. It's better on the sellers than the Confessor, but it's worse on the buyers than the Confessor. And so here we get a decent amount of supply in the last 24 hours, but already in much smaller volumes. That is driving the price back down. So it looks like we may finally be going back to a more normal Tech 3 destroyer market. Here's the Jackdaw as well, finally definitely also absorbing that wave and getting back towards that 40 million range. 41 million for the sellers, still someone with 228 at 43 million should keep things from surging back up here. 40 million for the buyers, we are getting pretty close to that. And then what's this Zwepel doing? That one's actually back down to 35 million isk here, 33 million now for the first seller, 32 million for the buyers. And this is a bit of a gamble that you have to consider. We're clearly oversupplied, but you don't have that much room anymore in the Jackdaw. On the other hand, the difference is very, very noticeable between this Zwepel and all the other tactical destroyers. So that's a little bit of the choice that you have to make. It is entirely possible here that a large alliance decides to buy up a fleet of Zwepels, and then the investment would make sense. It's also possible that we'll just continue to muddy along, that all of these other destroyers will normalize towards 40 million isk, closing that margin with this Zwepel, making it less and less attractive, and that eventually this one will just settle at this 35 million range where it's been at before. So it's difficult to say, but this is obviously a pretty noticeable and substantial decline, below 35 million on the average. That's, I'd say, the gamble. Do you think that a large group may be interested in a massive Zwepel fleet so that they'll buy that up, let's say towards 40 million or something like that? Then a purchase as close as possible to 32 million does make sense, and you'll probably be able to grab it considering these sellers. Or you think that nope, we're still seeing too much supply in these others as well, so that eventually that's going to spill over in the Zwepel once these other destroyers get towards that 40 million, get those buyers back to 37, 35 million as a buy price, then this is not abnormal then. So that's a little bit of the choice that you have to make. In the cruisers here, bit of pressure on the Legion again. I'm still holding on to mine. 147 for the sellers, 133.5 for the buyers. The Loki is stabilizing as well at the moment. Slight uptrends to be seen. 182 for the sellers, 163 for the buyers. Availabilities okay. Fresh supply not that much. Legion, gonna take a quick look at that. Fresh supply not too much, a little bit more than the Loki, but nothing too crazy. Definitely in line with the downwards pressure compared to the slight uptick here on the Loki price. The Zwepel is going back down, 150 million for the sellers, 136 for the buyers, and that is almost a full page with 3014 for the least popular cruiser. That's basically too much supply for this market, but nowhere near a buy opportunity. And then the Tengu is seeing some more pressure as well, getting back to its normal 150 range. 166 million for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. Fresh supply not that much anymore, but I guess nobody's buying these Tengus from the sellers to get this chart result. So the Take 3 cruiser market right now trading a little bit below average, or definitely under pressure, but nowhere near another buy opportunity that is super pronounced here. So we'll have to wait and see. I have one very cheap Legion, but that's basically all I'm willing to gamble in the cruiser market at the moment. And then we have the extra product for this time. We've got at 47.10, let's say. And it's a bit of a personal thing that I want to look at. It's the dspace reppers, so armor reps, and we'll also do the shield boosters, because those tend to be a big part of my income, and I noticed a very big drop in some of those prices. So we gotta go to ship equipment. Let's start with hull and armor with armor repairers. I'll start with the large ones and take a look at those dspace. So normally you find this stuff in exploration sites. All right, 8 type large armor rep is definitely trading well above average. So almost 560 million for the sellers, 440. Not that much supply. Any competition in the Tranquility Trading Tower? Someone's selling it for less than 500 million isk. But is it in? Well, you could probably buy it from here. Yeah, okay, still pretty damn expensive. So the large ones here, Centum B type, that one seems to be a slightly below average price, maybe. Yeah, 168 here for the sellers, 147 for the buyers. A C type, very flat, a little bit of a downwards trend at the tail end here though. 126, yeah, that's definitely more supply than demand. Buyers are coming in at 100 million, and then the X type could be a bit different, going for 350 million, definitely trading above average. We'll take a quick look at the others on the charts here as well. Bit of a jump But yeah, coming from 100 million, that's maybe not that surprising. Pretty stable. Slight downward pressure here. Around average or below that. And then the Corpus X-type large armor rep is actually doing really well, going for almost 400 million ISK. So this is basically the chart that I do see a little bit more. Maybe in the mediums we'll see more of that. Quite a very wavy behavior, and sometimes you're on the downside, 250 below that, and then on the high side above 400 million. That is quite an impressive margin between these two. And so at the moment I've basically been noticing a much lower income. So let's do the medium ones next. There should be some of them that I'm providing as well. So the A-type medium armor rep went up to Symptom ones went up to 500 million ISK, back down to 400 million ISK, and at a low point, not even that long ago, these went for 260 million. Maybe I brought some stuff here. So this is clearly right now recovered massively in the month of April and early May to a very nice price point. We're back on a 400 million, slightly above average price, but we come from a 1 year low point just in early April. That's a pretty impressive wave. Same thing here on the B type. Look at that. Went down to 150 million almost, shot up to 300 million, and we're now stabilizing around the average. Centum C type, very same wave here again in April. I must have come a couple of times right here on this bottom. So that's interesting. At least we recovered. This one not doing that well. 146 for the sellers, 130 for the buyers. But it's a lot more reasonable than close to 100 million if you look at this full 1 year chart. Yeah, very same wave right here again. A bottom, very pronounced bottom for less than 200 million. At the low end early April, back up to 500 million, and right now at 400 million above average. And then here we get that same thing. Yeah, this is what I noticed, and so very good that I take a look at this. We're back in an okay territory for most of these to sell. But some of them are still definitely struggling, and we're away from the peak. And so we had a massive wave. I can't really explain it. Maybe it is because of the nerfs to resistances, that to make some ships work just as well as before, you need those dead space wrappers for that. But this is a very high potential wave, of course, and that right here early April selling your armor wrappers was not very good. Let's see if we have the same thing in the small ones. Just gonna take a quick look at the charts on this one. No, here we have a very different one. A-type went up to 110 million a couple of times and is now back to a slightly below average price. B-type did have that May spike and that April bottom. C-type, this is quite a bit different. Oof, A-type, look at that, went up to 70 million ISK and is now actually at a low point. So it's maybe the small stuff is not doing that well actually. That's struggling, yeah, struggling as well. Struggling is very interesting. Small dead space wrappers are struggling, almost all of them. Quite a difference. I did not expect that. And then the medium ones are doing okay. Have just recovered from that really bad period. So interesting. Quite a bit of this drops from the Sancha sites. So very interesting. Let's hope for some medium type drops and not some small drops. And then we also went to the shields, boosters. Let's start with large, but let's try and speed it up a little bit. On this one, let's just see if we can spot a trend. A-type, I'd say below average. B-type, definitely below average. C-type, yeah, also below average and actually falling back at the tail end. X-type, 300 million. That's actually pretty cheap. So if you want to build that X-type large booster type ship, this would be okay to do. A-type is actually around average. This one for the pit. Around average, but the GIST A-types are definitely pretty low on the large ones. Let's see if there's again big differences with the medium ones. Let's go over these. GISTM just recovering from a spike up to almost 500 million ISK. What are they selling for? 340, very expensive, I'm gonna say. B-type above 75, higher end of its average. And this one also recovering from a spike, trading around average. A-type maybe a touch above average or around that. And then B-type is having a spike right now, up to 250 million ISK. Yeah, 273 for the sellers. That is not bad at all. And then the C-types just spiked up in May as well, up to 70 million ISK, and is now recovering from that. So a very different story here in the medium shield boosters that are in a great place to be selling them, I think. And I will quickly take a look at the small dspace ones. That one is actually, yeah, had an April spike and is now back to an average or even below average price. Giston B-type just crashed back down as well from 130 million down towards 75. C-type too little in volume to really make any sense of, but A-type is also struggling again, going back down. B-type is holding to that average, so that one's doing okay, and this one is also crashing back down to a less than average price. What a difference in this. Very interesting to see all of these dead spaces for this episode. I think very important for explorers. Try to sell at the right time. There's definitely big differences, and I'm also seeing like bi-monthly moves or so. It takes like 1-2 months quite often to move from a low point to a very high point, so patience there definitely makes a lot of sense. I think I made some mistakes on that as well. Sometimes I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna sell at the price it goes for, but it started to be quite noticeable in some of these that that we were going very low. And yeah, on these medium ones, I think it was definitely confirmed. Basically an April bottom that was very bad for these medium armor wrappers, and I struggled through that as well. So okay, at least we know what's happening with that. I hope that I get some more success in exploration, but on the other hand, I want to take part in these invasions as well. Perhaps we'll see what we decide to do. For now, that's it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.